Shwmae a chroeso I Sgwrs, podlediad Consortiwm Canolbarth y De. Yn y podlediad hwn byddwch chi'n clywed y trafodaethau diweddara am bob math o bethau addysg. Hello and welcome to Sgwrs, the Central South Consortium podcast. In this podcast we'll bring you the very latest discussions on all things education.
Hello and welcome to Sgwrs, the podcast series from Central South Consortium. My name is Ben Partridge. I'm the Enhanced Lead Practitioner for Secondary Digital Learning at the CSC. Today I'm joined by Damian Parker, Apple Distinguished Educator and Head of Design Technology at St Cyres Comprehensive School in Penarth. Thank you for joining us today, Damian.
Hi Ben, how are you?
Good, thank you. Damian and I are a number of teachers exploring ways in which AI can be integrated into the classroom. And today we're going to discuss some of the interventions we have been trialling this year with learners using a range of different AI tools. Later, I'll be asking Damian about the work he has been doing using AI to reduce teacher workload. AI use has grown exponentially across all sectors in recent years, and education, like all institutions, is desperately trying to adjust to the changing landscape. There's a lot of skepticism around the use of AI, especially in secondary education, where digitally literate learners using AI in assessments is seen as a threat to the integrity of qualifications. So, kind of against that backdrop then, Damian, what made you think that AI was something that you wanted to put some time into researching?
I think because of our subject area, we always like to investigate what's new in the technology world, and consider then how we can bring the use of this technology into our teaching. So, having attended a range of workshops and seminars through Apple in the summer, I was intrigued to find how we could adapt maybe the use of AI in our design technology lessons.
So after having spent some time looking into different types of AI technology and kind of knowing sort of some of the concerns that there are around AI, I guess kind of what do you see the role of AI being in your classroom? How do you see pupils maybe using it?
So within my classroom, we've embraced AI in many areas. Now, obviously, we've had to do a lot of research behind the scenes to see what's appropriate and then how we can utilize the power of AI for student work. What we've investigated was how we could use AI to help develop projects and resources for both teaching and learning.
You know, there's a lot of concerns around pupils using AI to kind of generate their own work and that being used in assessments, whereas hopefully, you know, what we can show through this project is that there's actually a lot of ways in which AI can kind of contribute to project work and contribute to pupils learning in the classroom. I think a lot of that anxiety around AI is actually sort of feeding some of the pupils' kind of willingness to use it. I think if pupils see teachers being very scared of AI and say, look, whatever you do, don't use AI to write your essays, then that's what pupils are want to go on and do, isn't it? You know, they're going to suddenly assume that this is a really powerful thing for writing essays, and that's all they're going to want to do with it. Whereas in actual fact, I think by discussing AI, being open about it, about its strengths and its weaknesses, suddenly pupils will start to see where it might be appropriate for it to be used, but also some of its weaknesses in terms of actually can't produce the most perfect essay, and it can't do that, but they will only know that unless we kind of discuss it with them. So on that note, kind of, do you have any examples of maybe how you've used AI in the DT classroom?
Yeah, we've got a few areas that we've been looking at and used so far. So if we start with research, we train our students to use AI, for example, when investigating new ideas for projects. You know, sort of in the same way as we would a Google research to gather information on a topic at the start of a project.
I think that's really important, isn't it? I think one of the areas that I've found is really powerful is if you teach pupils to use it as they would Google. If they Google something or search something up on a search engine and copy and paste it into their work, then that is of no use to them. Not only does it not get them any marks, but also it is at risk of committing plagiarism. Whereas if they use it as a jumping off point, then suddenly they're kind of snowballing their learning and they're looking at it in a little bit more detail. In my class, we had them maybe look at different ideas for developing briefs. So if they were given the brief of sustainability or something like that, could they suggest 10 different products they could use, and then maybe 3 or 4 of them would be relevant? And that idea of being able to self-edit down what the AI has suggested and put it in their own words and pull out the things that are relevant, I think shows that pupils are taking it that step further than just utilising what AI has told them. And
yeah, I think I totally agree with you there, Ben. So, you know, if we start with the project ideas, this is an area that we've used quite a lot this year, where we've asked our students to think about possible ideas for their projects. Now, this is always an area at the start of the year when students need support from us. They find it quite difficult to come up with a range of possible ideas, and getting the ball rolling can sometimes be quite difficult. So using AI, students type in which area that they have an interest in. For example, it could be cycling or camping, and then use AI to come up with a range of possible project ideas. And what we have found by doing this, the ideas are not always a simple copy and paste exercise, which, that's a sort of generalization that people think that it's just, that's been taken from AI. We have found that AI simply comes up with a starting point, as it were, which students can go away then and develop on their own project briefs. This is very similar again to how we as teachers would try and guide our students. So it's like a superpower second hand then in the classroom. So using AI this way, it's really sort of helped our students make a good start on projects. This sort of gives them the inspiration then to move forward.
And move forward independently, isn't it? That it will allow them to maybe make progress that normally would take some sort of interaction from the teacher. And that's something I'll touch on a little bit when we talk about my work with photography. How have you found pupils using ChatGPT or other AI products to give feedback on their own work when it is in process?
So when developing a project, the students will always have a target user in mind who they will work with throughout the design and the making process. As well as a live client, we now use AI to give feedback on design ideas and suggest ways forward for development. These are the areas which we will discuss further during the lessons, obviously, and students will then create their own development work from these points which are generated by AI.
So can you give me an example of maybe a student project that comes to mind and how they've used AI to feedback onto their design?
One of the students that from our sixth form was currently developing a product where it holds a range of tools when sort of fixing and repairing a car. Now, obviously, he had a live client that he was working with, but there was a range of problems that he was overcoming when he was designing, which he didn't have time or the access to get the answers to. So what we did, we put him into ChatGPT, and a range of the answers that came out from AI, it was interesting because we'd already discussed these, like the use of how the tools would be racked, the sort of sizing and sort of the issues around this product. And there was a few sort of ideas generated that we hadn't thought about, and using AI is sort of helped our student sort of move down a different direction. And it was just a gentle prompt in the right direction that gave him sort of new ideas. So I think using the AI for feedback was extremely helpful in this way.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's a really interesting example of where AI can influence learning and influence progression without doing the work for them, because it's still the pupil's responsibility to then go and implement those changes in their physical product or disregard them if they're not appropriate. But at least the AI there has contributed without actually doing the work for the pupil itself.
So I think like I agree. What you're saying there, Ben, is it sort of gives us a starting point. It doesn't do the work for them, but it gives them suggestions of what direction to take. And I think in design technology, this is very important and has been very helpful, because it just sort of steers them, and then the students go off and do all the work. So it's, in a way, for people who think AI is just going to generate all the work, it will not. But it's so helpful in getting them to think, and it's giving them that starting point, giving them that nudge, giving them that prompt that has been very, very useful this year with idea generation. But also, like, because we're on the topic of our target user feedback, it can be very, very helpful then into helping them develop further designs that they've already created.
Definitely. And I think, we're talking here about AI in the creative classroom because there's been a lot of kind of guidelines and research published in terms of how AI should be used in assessments in the traditional form of written assessments, whereas I think with NEAs in more creative subjects where the outputs aren't necessarily all written, there's definitely a grey area in terms of where AI can be used to really contribute to pupils' learning. So, for example, the JCQ has put out a publication in 2023 called AI Use in Assessments, Protecting the Integrity of Qualifications. For anyone listening who is concerned about kind of the grey areas around using AI or any apprehensions about that, then obviously this is a fantastic place to start. And inside that, it says that any use of AI which means students have not independently demonstrated their own attainment is likely to be considered malpractice. Now, I think, we'd all agree with that. It also acknowledges that while AI may become an established tool at the workplace in the future, for the purposes of demonstrating knowledge, understanding, and skill for qualifications, it's important for students' progression they do not rely on tools such as AI. Students should develop the knowledge, skills, and understanding of the subjects that they are studying. And I think what we are trying to do is look at where AI can contribute to that, developing the knowledge, skills, and understanding of the subject in a way that enhances their work, enhances their learning, and also they find really engaging as well.
I think what we got to remember as well, especially in the field of design technology, are these students, they're quite young and they haven't got the experience that we have got as teachers and designers. So AI is a really powerful tool to help them explore different avenues, to help them look in a different direction, or to think of a different way of how a product can be designed. So for us, it's been such a useful research and investigation tool, and recently we've started bringing it into the design and development. And I think you have to think of it as a tool, not a tool that will do all the work, but a tool that's going to help and to guide, like we do as teachers. And I think if you think of it as in that sort of term, then you will get a lot out of it. And the quicker we sort of move forward with this, and the more experience that we have, and I think the more that people sort of develop the use of AI, I think it's going to be far, far greater for the student outcomes.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought you raised a really interesting point there about, as a teacher, we're constantly finding that we are trying to narrow the gulf between our own experiences and knowledge and skill set and that of our students. And that is something that, when we were learning our different subject areas and specialisms, AI wasn't a thing, whereas now it is something that maybe we can use to help narrow that gap. Not completely, and obviously there are other things that are really important in contributing to that. Just sort of, for example, now going from design technology now into photography, which is another area that we've been looking at using AI in, and again in that kind of research and development stage of the project. So, for example, when pupils start on their individual project, they are given or choose a title, and one of the first things they do then is they decide on their first photo shoot based on that title. Or in art, it could be their first practical piece. And what pupils have been doing is with guidance from the teacher, using ChatGPT in just the same way that they would use Google to generate ideas of maybe what is the first photo shoot that they want to complete. So say their title is contrast, well then they can ask ChatGPT to suggest me 10 photo shoots on the topic of contrast. They could refine that further, so maybe they want to look at 10 photo shoots on the topic of contrast with a focus on fashion or portraiture or still life. And as you mentioned before, not all of those will be perfect, not all of those will be relevant, but at least then the pupils have a nice base point to start from, and then they start working out what is relevant, what is not relevant, using that computational abstraction technique to decide on what is that they're going to pursue. And again, the AI hasn't done the work for them, it's just purely being a starting point or a stepping stone, which is very similar to my role as a teacher in those lessons, where I would then get around the class, I would speak to them about what their ideas are, speak to them about what they're passionate about, use my own prior knowledge of previous lessons to say, well, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing that? And those conversations will still take place, but it's just allowing those pupils that have an understanding of how to use AI to get a little bit of a head start while I work around the 24 pupils in my class that you have 1 hour to get through, So it's a really useful tool I found in terms of developing that kind of independent learning. So far we've talked mainly about text AI in the form of ChatGPT, In photography and art, we've been looking at maybe working with a few different forms of text-to-image generators as well. So one of the things that we've been looking at in photography is Adobe Firefly. So this is a piece of online software that is available if you have an Adobe Creative Cloud subscription. So for any pupils maybe studying photography or doing digital technology, they will have an Adobe Creative Cloud account, and this is something that they can access using their hub password. So one of the ways that we've been looking at using it is using it to create composition studies for final pieces. So using image generation AI such as Adobe Firefly allows pupils to test out different ideas, test out compositions. Like you were saying with design technology, it gives you a range of different ideas for pupils then to choose from. So again, this is not a case of the AI doing the work for them, but maybe they could, for example, in art, emulate different compositions that they might want to use in their final piece in different styles and different media. Again, this isn't about passing that work off as their own. It's about generating ideas that then they can take into that composition, into their final pieces, and be able to discuss kind of the pros and cons of those. Some of the techniques I've been trying with my A-level class, and I've been surprised about how well they've kind of got to grips with it and the impact that it's have, is using text-to-image AI software like Adobe Firefly or Microsoft Bing to actually develop their writing skills and their image analysis. So we found in our GCSE and going into our A-level classes that pupils were struggling to analyse the kind of formal elements of a photograph. Describing the composition, the lighting, the tone, different things like that. And while we had kind of traditional methods of developing those skills in pupils, one of the things that I was interested in seeing is if pupils had to recreate a photograph using text prompts in AI, would that help them develop their written skills? And what I found was that actually pupils really enjoyed that process, but they also found it quite frustrating because they were in their head, what they had written was perfect, and previous to that, the only person telling them that actually it didn't quite match up to what was in their head was their teacher. Whereas now Adobe Firefly was saying, well, if you tell me that this is what that photograph is going to look like, here's the image that I'm going to give you. And when that doesn't match up to what they had in their head, they initially found it quite frustrating, sometimes quite funny because they're very humorous results in AI, but also then they had to dig back into their writing, reflect on what they'd written, change things around, be more specific, use more focused language. And we found that actually by trying to recreate those images, they were developing their written skills to the point where their actual written work was improved. It also kind of started created an interesting jumping off point for some of my pupils actually looking at AI as a theme in their work. So for example, through trying to recreate their work in AI, I had one pupil who's doing product photography, and they were really, really struggling with the fact that they were trying to recreate an empty. It was a really simple photograph. It was a photograph of a makeup tube or toothpaste tube or something like that in black and white on a white background. But because it was empty, obviously it had been rolled up, and there's lots of finger marks of where the user had kind of used it up. It was a very well used product, and so she was asking AI to show a picture of an empty makeup tube, and to AI, an empty makeup tube just looks like a full makeup tube. There's no difference to it. So again, it got her thinking about, well, actually, what we perceive as that product has a very physical connection to how it's been used and things like that. So she started looking at product photography, but from the focus of older products or used products or things like that. So AI made her think about her own work in a different way and look at it in a more detailed way. We've got another pupil who's very interested in kind of surrealism and humor in his photography. So he was very interested in catching AI out. So he was trying to come up with prompts that AI would never be able to generate because they were kind of related to kind of human experience that it would have no reference point for. So he was looking at kind of getting AI to make the perfect sandwich, or getting AI to represent the perfect day out or the perfect holiday and things like that. And actually what he uncovered was the model that AI was based on was showing a certain gender and racial bias. So the perfect sandwich was always seemed to be held by a Caucasian woman, and the perfect holiday was always featuring a slim white woman on a beach. And then suddenly he's asking, well, why is that? Why is it only ever showing me those types of images? And then we got into the question of, well, this is where AI is now. Would you want that AI maybe looking at your CV and deciding whether you get a job or not? Or would you want that AI maybe looking through CCTV footage and in relation to kind of looking at a crime or something like that? So now suddenly he's looking at, through creating images and generating images that he started off in linked to his photography project, he has a deeper understanding of what AI means for him in terms of the implications for them going forward. And I think definitely, I don't know if you find this with your learners, that they're really engaged in AI because they understand that it's going to have an impact on them and on their futures. It's here to stay, and it's something that they are going to have to get used to using.
I think it's, at this stage, it's early days. They're definitely taking it on board, and when we were introducing AI to the students, they were already aware. So, for staff who are a little bit concerned about the use of AI, then unfortunately it's already out there. So the students have taken it on. They're keen to learn, as with anything else which is sort of media based, they're already experimenting. They're already pushing the boundaries and spending hours and hours on a certain app or a certain area. So it's up to us as teachers and educators to look at, well, how can we use the power of AI now to produce better outcomes, to produce better resources, to produce a better learning environment for our students. And I think that's where the education is going to be now, is the use of the AI, and not worry so much about the outcome, because we know the outcome is going to get there, but it's how that journey to getting that outcome, that's the sort of area that we are focusing on now. What we need to teach these students to get those outcomes, and the sort of prompts that are needed. So yeah, I think the students are already using AI. We've just got to accept that, haven't we?
Yeah, I think that's something that I always think when there's talk about banning ChatGPT or banning AI, and I think, well, how do you propose doing that? Because you could block it on the internet side. Well, then how do you stop pupils from using it at home? And I was talking to our head of languages. He said he's seen it in pupils' books, and pupils have generated the work online, and then they've written it down in their book in their own handwriting. So like, what if you propose banning it? Great, but what is your solution to that? And although there are AI checkers out there, it's going to be a bit of an arms race between AI getting, who's ahead? Is it the AI checker or the AI itself? And how accurate are kind of those AI checkers that are out there? So I think our role is like any kind of big technological development, is to acknowledge that it is happening, and we have to guide our students on how to use it in a responsible way, and also what are the benefits to them? How can it help them be a better student, make better progress, develop skills, that are going to be relevant for them when they leave us. I
think, if you're worried about AI just producing the outcome, then we need to produce resources that allow the students to evidence how they got to that outcome, and maybe test their knowledge at the end. So if they're coming up with a final piece, then okay, they've got that final piece. So let's test their knowledge on that final piece. Because if they used AI to generate that final piece and they didn't do any background knowledge or any learning, they're not going to succeed then if you test their knowledge after that piece has been handed in and marked. So, I think as teachers, we need to think about, okay, if they can use ChatGPT or any other sort of app to generate a piece of work, whether that's for a homework or an examination piece, well, how can we then test the students, and how do we know that they've got to that piece? And I think, if we can devise ways and think of ways where the students can show us that sort of journey, then I think it will work well, and it can be such a powerful tool to use. But if we don't address that, AI can just generate an outcome, then I do think we're going to be, on a sort of side of danger, really.
I agree. And I think, if you're worried that pupils can replicate the outcome they need in your lesson using AI, then maybe the outcome needs to change, or you need to rethink maybe how you're assessing that outcome, isn't it? So does it involve pop quizzes after the work's been submitted to check understanding? And I know you're going to talk a little bit later on that, on how AI can help the teacher in terms of generating those extra resources and things like that. Or how can we develop the resilience in learners to, say, use AI to suggest, for example, in photography, a range of different photographers on a subject? And then how do we generate the resilience in them to stop them then saying, write me a 500-word essay on this photographer? Okay. And if that can't be done, then do we have to change the way that we assess? Do we have to ask them, right, I want you to write a comparison between your work and the photographer's, rather than something that can be purely replicated through available data online? Is it something that has to be more personal and more reflective and contain information that can't be reproduced by a kind of cold calculating computer? And is that one way out of that? I think going back to the point about pupils do seem really engaged in this, and like you said, if you're worried about not using AI in the classroom, well, it's already happening. Pupils are using it, and we have a responsibility as teachers of kind of introducing this technology, or at least knowing enough about this technology so that we can reassure pupils that actually, you know, their effort and their time and the effort they're investing in their work is still worthwhile. What they need to do cannot be replicated by a computer. And I think that is almost a crisis in confidence and a crisis in faith in terms of students. A lot of students nowadays, if they just feel like, what's the point in trying if AI can do this or ChatGPT can do it for me? I remember I started uni in 2008 and the financial crash. And I remember coming out of uni and suddenly the kind of social contract that my parents had bought into and I'd bought into of you work hard in school, you get a good grade, you get good grades, you get a good job. Suddenly that wasn't the case anymore. And I remember thinking, well, what do I need to do to get ahead now after I've followed all the rules? And our students have been through that twice already. They've been through it with COVID, where the kind of the social contract of what they need to do has been ripped up. And now they're going through it again with AI, where they might see people in their class using AI and feeling like they get away with it or something like that, or thinking, what's the point of me putting in all this effort if my teacher says don't use AI because AI can do it for you? Then they're going to believe that, aren't they? It's our job to say, well, actually, you don't want to use AI for that because you can do a better job of it. But have you thought about using it in this way to take your project a little bit further or take your work to that next level?
I agree, Ben. And, you know, it's funny because this year has been such a fast-paced learning curve for the use of AI. Like when we first introduced it at the start of the projects, and we were saying to the students, well, why didn't you suggest asking AI to do this? Or why didn't you suggest what can AI come up with in terms of ideas for projects or development? And the initial thoughts were, oh, sir, are we really supposed to use this? Isn't this cheating? But then the more they got to understand it, and the more they got to understand, you know, how to put in the correct prompts and the correct text, they started using it more and more then as a learning resource. And the answers and the information they were getting from there, you could see then was helping them develop their own work and their own ideas. And like we go back to the beginning, it was just giving them those starting points. And I think the more that they sort of eased into the use of AI, the more they could see, well, actually, yeah, this is an amazing tool that we can use and I can use to get the best out of my ideas for my projects.
Definitely. And again, that idea of, well, am I allowed to use this? Well, yes, in this format, in this guide, within these boundaries, isn't it? And you know, like we said at the start, using Google as an example, well, yes, you're allowed to use Google, you're allowed to use an online search engine, providing that you don't then take that information as is and submit it as your own. You know, it's using it within the guidelines of whatever the teacher, the setting the teacher has provided, or in case of exam classes, the exam board. So moving on now from kind of using AI in the classroom, I know you've been doing a lot of work in terms of teachers using AI to help them reduce their workload in terms of resource production and things like that. Do you mind talking a little bit about the work you've been doing there?
Yeah, so, like I say, for all of us, AI is so new. We've been all exploring and looking at ways that we can use it for both teaching and learning. So recently I've been exploring the use of AI to create theory resources to supplement my exam notes to improve student outcomes within the summer exam. So using ChatGPT, I add the points I want to include in my theory notes, and then I let AI generate the resource. From there, I'll ask AI to generate a range of questions with answers based on that particular text which was generated. This later then will be added to a quiz app like Socrative to test my student knowledge. Now, using this workflow has made making resources far quicker, and for me as a teacher, it saves very important time. For example, for revision, I've been adding the text previously generated to an AI software which I've come across called Lumen 5, which will convert the text to video. The resource created is great for students to use then to strengthen their own knowledge of the topic just before an exam. Now, this can be output either to look at on their computer screens, or you can even generate it so it's in the format suitable to view on their phones. This workflow can simply be used straight from the software. However, I like to tweak and make subtle changes later before presenting to students. But for some teachers, when I've shown them how to use this, we just use it straight from AI, and it is suitable to use straight away. It's just that the more you get used to it, the more you start to get into the refinement of the outcomes.
Yeah, I've seen some of the videos you produced on Lumen 5, and it's really impressive. Like you said, it's down to you in terms of how much input you want to have in terms of refining them and things like that. And obviously, they require some copy reading but as we said before about, will AI mean that we have to change the work that we set and the way that we assess? Well, actually, this is one way of doing that without it being something that would take you days and days and days of time. Hopefully, after listening to this, we'll have some teachers kind of reconsidering either their views on AI, or those that have been interested in AI maybe but have been a little bit daunted by that. Kind of what advice would you give maybe a teacher that was thinking of either using AI themselves or maybe getting pupils to experiment with using AI in the classroom?
I think, it's like learning any sort of new technology. So for teachers who are not familiar with AI, my starting point would be to choose one software to learn, for example, ChatGPT. That would be definitely my go-to. Watch the many tutorials on YouTube, and this is a starting point which I looked into, and that's where I found my sort of training then. And start with small pieces of text. There are so many sites out there that you can use AI that it can be a minefield. So starting with one sort of app or piece of software in particular is always, I think, is the best way, and that's something that I sort of get my staff to do. From there, I simply found software which was suited to my needs and learned how to use that before moving on. Again, YouTube has so much information out there to train you. It's the best to find out about how to use these softwares, because there's so many sites that are dedicated to using, for example, ChatGPT or Lumen 5 or Canva. Okay, there are so many people now that are dedicated in the training and the use and the updates of these softwares.
Brilliant, thanks for that. I think like with any other, like you said about any other technology, we have a responsibility to prepare our learners for the world that they'll be going into, the world of work or the world of secondary school if they're in primary, and AI will be a part of that, won't it? So it's about how can we maintain the integrity of our assessments and ensure that pupils are being justly rewarded for the effort that they're putting in, but also how can we develop those skills that they need? How can we engage students in something that is going to impact on them far more than it is on us? And I think if teachers are frightened of AI and we tell our students don't use AI because it's going to write all your essays for you, what are students going to use AI for? They're going to use it to write their essays. We've got a responsibility to show students that actually, AI can't do everything for them. It is a tool that they can use to develop their skills and knowledge, but also it will not replace them, and their effort is appreciated by their teachers, and it's going to continue to be vital for their kind of future success. So we've talked a lot about kind of AI in general terms and some specifics. I was just wondering if we could finish maybe with some recommendations of different software or different things that we could look at. So kind of from a photography perspective, if you're looking for text to image and you're lucky enough to have a Photoshop license through Hub, Adobe Firefly is a really fantastic resource. It's really powerful in that it gives a lot of different styles of image you could generate. So for an art project, you could say, generate this and show me it as a lino cut, generate this and show me it as an oil painting. You can even get down to the point of changing the aperture and shutter speed of the photographic image that it creates. So again, for students understanding the concept and basics of photography, I find that a fantastic resource. For those of you without an Adobe Photoshop license in your school, then, I mean, just today you've shown me Microsoft Bing and their image generation, text-to-image software seems, right up there with any I've seen. You've also recommended Ideogram to me before. But in terms of some of the stuff that you've been doing, Damian, what would you kind of recommend people have a look at?
So, for generating text and resources, my go-to software so far has been ChatGPT. Everything that we use so far has been free versions, although we are looking into buying more paid versions. The more that we find the use of these softwares, perhaps we need to now buy a more professional sort of level. But at this stage, everything that we use so far has been free. And now to create text to video, I've had a lot of success with Lumen 5. And I know other staff in the school have started to use Lumen 5 now and have really adapted to it very, very quickly. Now, there are many areas that we are currently exploring. For example, the text to image is looking very exciting and looks like it's going to be a lot of fun to learn. And we are watching closely the development of, well, only this week I've been looking at text to 3D modeling, which could be revolutionary for the area of design, where you type in what sort of model you want to create and it creates an STL file which you can then download and 3D print. It's at early stages so far, but it's with the speed that AI is developing, I'm sure I'm going to be in this position next year where I'm going to be talking about how we're using text to 3D models with the students and how they're producing 3D models just from using the correct prompts. And I think everything that we say and we use, it all goes back to that use of prompts. Educating the students, what they put in, what they feed into the AI is what they get out. And I think that's where the importance of the teaching and learning will happen with AI.
Definitely. And I think that point of economy of language, subject-specific vocabulary, I mean, that's just good teaching, isn't it? Whether it goes into a prompt, whether it goes into a textbook. So on the topic of kind of stuff that's upcoming that we're looking forward to, I know you're saying about text to 3D models for STL files for 3D print. I think that's amazing. And like you said, in a year's time, if we re-recorded this, half of the stuff we say now will be, I won't say out of date, but definitely would need a revision.
Yeah, I totally agree there. But like you say, it's a starting point. We're at the start of a learning journey, and it is exciting. And the future looks really exciting. And I think we've just got to look at this now instead as a threat, as something that's going to really sort of change both the teaching and the learning.
So all that's left for me to say is to thank you to Damian for joining me. Thank you, Damian.
Thank you, Ben.
And thank you for listening.
Diolch am wrando ar y benod hon o Sgwrs. Cofiwch ein dilyn ar Twitter a Facebook, tanysgrifio ein sianel YouTube, ymuno yn cymunedau ar ein gwefan a darllen ein bwletin ysgolion wythnosol am y newyddion diweddaraf. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sgwrs. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, join our online communities via our website, and read our weekly school bulletin for the latest news. Hwyl am y tro. Bye for now.